everyone, and welcome to our YouTube channel, Moneyline with Nancy at TV. In case you're not a subscriber yet, please do subscribe. Just press the subscribe button as well as turn on the notification bell so that you can get notifications when we upload our videos. Don't also forget to subscribe and join, follow, like our other social media platforms. Of course, you're seeing it right about now. Don't also forget to share this video across your platforms. Enjoy the video. All right, welcome back to the program. My guest, as you can see, is already here, Dr. Obiaraeri. Good morning and welcome to you. Again, good morning again.
Nancy.
Yes. Now, let's get started. What are your sentiments around the 2025 increased revenue that the president has added to the existing one that the National Assembly is currently looking at?
My sentiment is it's in a step in the right direction. I've always believed that I've always had a contrary view to those that believe that 49 trillion naira budget, about 31 billion, is a very ambitious one. No, Nigeria actually has capacity to do 100 trillion, 150 trillion naira budget. I've also believed that we have no business running budget deficit. I believe we can actually do crude output of 2.4 million barrels a day and reduce production cost to at least $25 per barrel. So it shows that the federal government of Nigeria is actually taking the right steps by benchmarking output at 2 million barrels. They can do it. All they need is to provide security, make sure that our pipelines are not tampered with, meter our flow stations to ensure that nothing is diverted, and that is it. So I believe we can also do 2.4 million barrels a day. The jack-up of the revenue expectations to about 6 trillion, 5 trillion is welcome too. But what I will also want them to do, because there was no breakdown of what that 5 trillion will be used for, I expect them, rather than give 500 billion naira to set up a agri development trust fund, seed it with about $3 billion, and then use that $3 billion as equity contribution to attract extra $12 billion, and then do clusters of agro-industrial clusters, 2,500 clusters across the key agro belts in Nigeria, $6 million per cluster. We've done the numbers. From each cluster, they'll be able to create at least agro rangers that will help to enforce security and protect the land and generate nothing less than $42 million. That means we can actually generate nothing less than $109 billion from those 2,500 clusters, create over 10 to 20 million jobs. So it's a step in the right direction. We should encourage them and then ensure that whatever the extra revenues that we generate should be used appropriately to catalyze development, job creation, and wealth creation in Nigeria.
Okay, I heard you loud and clear. You have the opinion that our budget should be more than what we're doing right now, and there's no need for us to have a deficit. If you take a look at where we're coming from,
Yes.
2024, at least under this administration, in 2024, we had a 9 trillion naira deficit. 2025 is projected 13 trillion. So if the federal government is saying that we got additional 4.5 trillion naira revenue from FIRS, customs, and other government-owned enterprises to add to the 2025 spending plan, one would also ask, you're an investment banker, if you are borrowing money from people and you do not have enough and you suddenly see a largesse, doesn't it make sense for you to use the money that came as a largesse to plug the borrowing gap which you have?
I totally agree with that conventional thinking. Yes, you anticipated 13 trillion deficit. You now discovered, maybe by blocking loopholes or some variables you did not count, take into consideration, that you generate extra 5.4 trillion. Conventionally, you expected that deficit to be reduced by 5.4 trillion naira. And that is conventionally. I believe so much that Nigeria is such a country that is so blessed by God that we can do, even if we borrow $20 billion today, if we borrow $20 billion today and we invest it appropriately, it will help to catalyze development in this land.
Oh, okay. All right, Dr. Obiaraeri is still with me. Doctor, we had an interruption earlier. Can you
Yes,
hear me? Are you still there? Can I see
yes, I
Doctor,
can hear
please?
you loud and
Okay,
clear.
good, good. So just land on your point on the deficit.
Okay, so I am saying that, borrowing, leverage finance is not even bad in itself. If you look at the US, debt to GDP of the US is over 100%. The same thing for Japan. But you can see clearly. I was looking at your synopsis. I saw that Nigerian capital market market capitalization 65 trillion naira,
Trillion,
which
yes.
if you turn it to dollar is about $38 billion. Look at South Africa, $1.2 trillion, their market capitalization. Look at the US, their market capitalization is almost times 2 of their GDP. Their pension fund assets is 120% of their GDP. Borrowing, leverage financing is not a problem. The problem is, what are you leveraging to finance? I give you an example now. If we are to borrow $15 billion, like I said, the federal government can muster that courage, working with the state and local government, to set up that what we call agro trust fund. Use the 5.4 trillion that are going to have excess revenue as equity contribution, which will come to about $3 billion. And they borrow $12 billion, $15 billion to do massive agro-industrial parks in 2,500 centers, 1,000 hectares each. Now, see, in the next 1 year, we'll have over $109 billion generated here, 20 million jobs created. And we have 125,000 agro rangers helping the police and the army to protect Nigeria, fully armed, fully kitted, fully equipped, and fully remunerated. If we decide today to develop infrastructure, the federal government, we have an infrastructure development master plan that was developed with the help of the World Bank that said clearly that for us to move from the current fourth world level that we are to second world level, we must have consistent, solid investment of $100 billion every year for the next 30 years. That is $3 trillion.
2 trillion.
If you also look at the National Development Plan of the federal government, 2021 to 2025, it was clearly stated that they need to attract capital investment of $839 billion. And if you look at it, they didn't even achieve up to 10% of that. So borrowing is very, very good. Federal government cannot fund development in Nigeria with trickles from the physical revenue. But we need to borrow tied to assets, tied to catalyzing things that will bring productivity in Nigeria. I say to anybody who cares to listen, the most lucrative rail route in Nigeria today is the Lagos, Shagamu, Ijebu-Ode, Ore, Benin, Asaba, Onitsha, Owerri, Port Harcourt, Segu Bakaba, Lincoln on Airport, Umuahia, Okigwe, Enugu, go to Afiba and Abakaleke, back to Onitsha, back to Asaba. 817-kilometer rail network. We've done the numbers, we've done the researches, we've done the studies, working with some of the best rail private sector operators in Nigeria. We even went as far as setting up a private company, Rail Track LLC, both in the UK and Nigeria, to catalyze this. If we are very, very serious, it will cost $5.2 billion to do that rail. The level state involved, federal government will only help to put things together. Can decide today to set up their own SPVs, get a private rail sector operator, give them 20-25%. $1.2 billion equity financing, we know how to do it. The remaining $4 billion, we know how to raise 25-year money. We've done the numbers. That route is a route that has over 100 to 200 million ton traffic every year. It's a route that has almost about 300 million passenger traffic every year. In 8 years, it's payback 8 years. GBOT 45 years. Nigeria can do 12,000 rail network across Nigeria in the next 5 to 10 years using the GBOT architecture. If we are very serious in this country, look at the United Kingdom, 240,000 square kilometer landmass. They have rail coverage of 16,000 square kilometers.
Okay, Dr. Obiaraeri, let me come in here because I hear you clearly, but I also need to interrogate a few things that you're talking about. You talked about earlier in terms of having agricultural clusters. Part of what the president has said that he wants to use this 4.5 trillion additional revenue, and I think we also need to state that this additional revenue is coming from the 2024 budget. Because the president has not even signed the 2025 budget. The FIRS released its numbers just a few days ago and it surpassed target. It has given itself another target. So the president is saying that part of this money, for example, 1.5 trillion naira from that money will be used to for the Bank of Agriculture. You will agree with me that the Bank of Agriculture has been moribund in this country for decades, and that is one organization that should support the agricultural sector in terms of providing microcredits and all of that within the value chain of agriculture. Are you implying that that 1.5 trillion naira shouldn't be used for the Bank of Agriculture? There's another 1 trillion naira for the solid mineral sector to unlock that space. There's another 500 billion naira from that money to recapitalize the Bank of Industry, because it's also been said over the years that the Bank of Industry can do more than it is doing now because it's not recapitalized. I must also mention that the Central Bank of Nigeria is a part owner of the Bank of Agriculture. In fact, they actually also did set it up many years ago. Yes.
I am an investment banker over 23 years experience in this industry. The Bank of Industry in Nigeria is not well structured and properly arranged to handle the kind of agro cluster development that we want to do in Nigeria. It is still doing conventional banking. We can't reinvent the wheel. If you go to Netherlands, you go to Indonesia, you go to Malaysia, you go to even Slovenia, go to some of the countries that are doing well in terms of agro development. Netherlands, 17 million people, 18 million people, arable land mass of 1.2 million hectares. They do 124 billion euro exports every year. Nigeria can do times 3 of that. And why would the federal government even be funding Bank of Industry or Bank of Agriculture? Let me tell you, I will be very frank with you. 3 years ago,
they own it.
No need. That's 3 years ago.
China has the same.
Let me explain to you.
Yes.
Bank of Industry, Bank of Agriculture, if they are properly structured in terms of management and board, can actually raise funding for themselves without the federal government intervening. That is the problem we have in Nigeria. 3 years ago, on coach, I was able to arrange a group from Switzerland that was willing to put on ground $1 billion for Bank of Industry on lending facility. Nancy, at 4% interest rate, all-in fee of 2% for on lending. I approached them. I raised the issue with them. They never returned back that request. $1 billion all-in financing of dollar financing of 4%. See, in every if you look at how the financing work, the same thing with Afroexim, the same thing with AFDB. The Bank of Agriculture and Bank of Industry, if their board and management are doing what they're supposed to do, they should be very creative in how they can easily raise financing. They don't need to depend on federal government of Nigeria to give them stipend, to give them money. And that is why they are not doing what they are doing. Everything has been reduced to cronyism. Appointment to the board and management of those institutions have been reduced to cronyism. In Senate climes where things work well, those banks should have been privatized. Federal government of Nigeria should have reduced their equity holdings in them to about 20% and allow private sector investors to take equity shares in those banks. If you hand over 80% of the shares of Bank of Agriculture and Bank of Industry to private sector investors, they can easily raise their two funds of no less than $2 billion each. The problem we are having here is that we are spoon feeding them. And the same problem we have with the operations at NNPC. Look at Nigerian Liquefied Natural Gas. It's the only corporation that we have in Nigeria that is paying good dividend to the financial account. It is 51% owned by private investors, the likes of Shell, Total, and 49% owned by NNPC. They do not bring their MDs and their CEOs to come to the National Assembly to come and defend their budget. And you can see how efficient they are, despite the fact that they are not even sweating their trains to up to 65% capacity. They are named because of paucity of gas, natural gas supply to them. So okay. I applaud the federal government of Nigeria for thinking towards agriculture. But we should not continue recycling the same mistakes that we've been making for the past 25 years and see a different result. Okay. I expect them to set up an agricultural trust fund. Set up a crack team of board and management of men who understand what it means for agri-revolution. And then these men will go out there and let me tell you, Nancy, we can easily attract 12 billion funding for this through our diasporas. You just need to put the structures. We have put the structures in place. Nancy, if time permits me, I will break it down.
Okay.
What we need to
that
do,
could
how
be,
we will do it,
that
how
could
the
be
funding
another
will
show.
come.
Okay, that could be another show where we will look at about financing agriculture or developing an agricultural value chain in Nigeria. I could look at that on another edition of the program. But we're dwelling on the 2025 budget. And let me have your thoughts, because we have about less than 5 minutes for this to end. Let me have your thoughts on the budget deficit for 2024, currently at 9 trillion naira. I suppose, I assume that we've rolled over the 2024 budget to where we are right now because the government is still spending money. There's a school of thought also that the 4.5 trillion naira used to plug the gap of the 2024 budget, that is one. Then number two is that if we take a look at the 2025 budget where we are right now, the January to December cycle, obviously we have missed it where it is right now. That's second. The third part of it is that we have an NSIA that manages our sovereign wealth fund. Since this administration came in, I haven't even heard anything about savings. Some may argue and say, well, are you saving when you don't have money, enough money for infrastructure? But the little monies that we saved, the NSIA manages it around the three funds, Future Fund, Infrastructure Fund, and the Stabilization Fund, which we have. Then fourthly, inflation. Will this trigger inflation or it will not trigger? And do you think that perhaps the president is also playing politics a bit, telling Nigerians, so we made additional money, let's use it to do this, so we will think that everything is working?
Nancy, I will take the questions from the back.
Okay.
See, if you look at National Development Plan 2021-2025, it was envisaged and anticipated and projected that we'll have budget surplus in 2025. And it never happened. And if you look at the budget proposal for 2025, beside the deficit of 13 trillion, we are going to be using 15 trillion for debt servicing, which is very, very outrageous. Now, you ask this question: why is Nigeria Sovereign Wealth Authority not receiving funds? And you say people argue we need it. Yes, we need infrastructure. The infrastructure we need is infrastructure deficit that will require $100 billion every year to plug. And setting money aside by the 3 tiers of government with the Sovereign Wealth Fund cannot disrupt us attracting $100 billion investment if we're a very serious country. And I don't think Mr. President is playing politics. I always say this. It's very easy for people to sit at their corner and criticize. Government is a collective thing. I run a business and I know how difficult it is to manage about 178 people under our chain. And how much more a country as big as Nigeria. And that is why it is good for some of us to come and profile solutions and practically show all working through your own little corner how these things can. Because we run agro parks across the southeast. And Nancy, we can take a walk for you to see what we are doing in those agro parks. It's not something, we are not theorizing. We are selling what we have done in our little corner that is working so excellently well. What I expect the federal government of, like I said, we have no running budget deficit. In 2010, if you go to CBN record, October to be precise, we were doing 2.88 million barrels of crude and condensate every day for the 30 days of October 2010. Those oil wells did not dry up. Basically, what happened was that with investment insecurity sets in, and there was even a time the GMD and NPO that were losing about $1.9 billion every month through different inefficiencies. Those things can be plugged. All we need to do is to plug. If we plug those holes, $20 billion will come into the account. Let me tell you, Nancy, our tax GDP is about 6%. And this thing, even with what FIRS is doing, we have over 197 million Nigerians that are under poverty. But if we do things that will catalyze investment, that will catalyze productivity, that will enhance the wealth of every Nigerian, in such a way that the average Nigerian can easily earn 300 to 500 naira every month, and you apply 10% tax on it, FRS will do times 10 what they are doing now. The same thing, I don't know why they are still pussyfooting in approving the tax reform bill before the National Assembly. One of the provisions there was the harmonization of revenue collection under the NRS. And I keep on saying it. Customs do not remit up to 40% of what actually they are supposed to be collecting. If revenue is enhanced, and the role of customs, just like in the US, is reduced to staying at the border agency and allow the NRS to collect revenue. Nancy, I tell you, they will do 4 times what the customs and exchange commissions are doing now because of leakages and corruption.
Okay, so finally, the question on inflation, because we've got to go.
Inflation, let me tell you, tackling inflation, we have been tackling it through the wrong side. The problem of Nigeria is 95% from the physical side. Twinkling with the MPR, as the NNPC and CBN is doing, will not help us. Before now, under Obasanjo, under Yar'Adua, under Jonathan, NNPC was limiting about $3.5 billion to CBN, and they were able to defend Naira. Today, NNPC is not limiting $15 million to Nnaemeka Obiaraeri. So how do we achieve price and forex stability with this kind of madness? So rather than tackle the real issue that will drop inflation. We are chasing MPRs, which will not help us. What do we do if we want to tackle inflation? First of all, we need to tackle insecurity. We need to enhance productivity. We need to enhance non-oil exports to about $300 billion, which we can easily do. We need to deal with the white elephant in the room. We need to unbundle NNPC, privatize it like Petrobras. Brazilians were having the same problem we're having. Before they decided to sell down 72% of their shareholdings to core investors and retain only 28%.
Okay.
Today, Petrobras, $174 billion size, they do $121 billion revenue. They pay $44 billion to the Brazilian government and profit of $36 billion. If we unbundle NNPC, start down 70% of NNPC, the federal government hold the NNPC, 30% to three core investors, 10%, 40% to Nigerians, leave them on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange and New York Stock Exchange, and then do IPO of $20 billion. Nancy, I tell you, with the private sector efficiency injected, crude oil production cost will come down to $20 per barrel.
Okay.
And you will see investment coming in. And when we have investment coming in, productivity enhanced, inflation will crash. And there's no simple, hard and fast rule about this.
Okay. I think we'll leave it at that. You've given us a lot of things to chew and to think on, and perhaps to expand on other editions of the program. But thank you very much for joining us. I hope to speak to you soon, and have a lovely day.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for making it up to this minute, watching the video. Thank you all. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Moneyline with Nancy TV. Like, follow all our other social media platforms where we keep you up to speed with fantastic interviews, as well as markets, personal finance, business, and economy information. This is the best place to be. I'll see you all again in the next video.